Welcome to the third part of our ComCap Media Roundtable on hemp, the multi-billion-dollar crop. More and more consumers, patients, and their suppliers are just discovering how this old plant may improve their lives. That's why I now talk about this with Craig Goodwin, CEO, Director, and Founder of Naturally Splendid Enterprises in Vancouver, Canada. They sell hemp seeds to consumers, export hundreds of tons of it to South Korea, and extract healthy, active substances. David Wolf is a nutritionist and author of bestsellers like Superfoods, Longevity Now, or Sun Food Cuisine. He loves hemp for what it gives us for our healthier and happier lives. Now let's welcome Simon Scholes, a chartered financial analyst with First Berlin Equity Research. He sees investment opportunities in the global hemp industry developing after the ban is being lifted. Simon, how do you see this market? Are we fantasizing, or do you think it is really growing?
No, not at all. I mean, there's obviously a huge opportunity out there. I mean, some of the growth has already come, but I think there's years of growth ahead of us. And I think one of the major drivers is basically the functional food industry, which is also known as basically the health food industry. I mean, I think throughout the Western world, also in Asia, you're seeing an increased trend to healthy eating. I mean, that's been around, obviously, also for several years. And you're also seeing, in the Western world and also in Asia, aging populations who are, I mean, as people get older, they become more concerned about their health. And, I mean, this fits together very well with the trend towards hemp.
David, does your audience reflect what Simon just said?
Absolutely. There's a growing, almost unstoppable trend for more information about health. More developing markets are being created out there daily. It's expanding into places where health food stores were unheard of before. All over India, for example, all over the Philippines, for example. It's become a worldwide market, and hemp is one of those things that's spearheading that market, and that's where Craig is having a breakthrough now with South Korea, and developing the hemp industry in South Korea is very, very interesting to me. We have not discussed that before, but I'm excited to hear more about it.
Tell me more about South Korea and explain their expansion.
South Korea is an interesting model. They were relatively small importers of hemp, and they went from importing a few tons, 10 tons, 20 tons, into what looks like they will be the largest importer of industrial hemp through hemp seed this year on the planet.
Wow.
And if they're not number one, they'll be number two and very close. They went from nowhere to number two, and they're buying not just hundreds, but thousands of metric tons of just hemp seed at this point. And that's just one country. And what people don't realize is the population in Korea is only 50 million people. We're not talking hundreds of millions of people that have changed the industrial hemp environment forever on a business case. This is just the beginning. It's one small country in Asia with many other countries falling in line. A lot of products and a lot of countries that are surrounding Korea look to them for what's happening next. South Korea has been known to be innovators and leaders in many products, in nutritional products, and so it's not unlikely that countries surrounding that area have taken note what's happening. And in fact, I know that's true because we're getting lots of interest outside of South Korea. As you know, Simon, we see Japan coming online. We see countries like China who actually grow product as well. They're very interested in Canadian grown agricultural products. So we see massive opportunity. We're very fortunate, David, as you well know, I mean, being in Canada and the United States, the agricultural practices of Canada are recognized the world over to be highly ethical, highly reliable. And then we have that God-given environment geographically. It has the right temperate, it has the right soil, the right amount of rain, the right amount of sun, and we grow in Canada the most amazing oil seeds, whether it be canola or whether it be hemp. And that's why when we talk on a business case, yes, other countries will come online. Yes, other countries will grow hemp, but there's only one Canada. And there's only one area where you can produce the absolute premium edible hemp seed. And I believe that Canada has as good a shot at it as any country in the world.
Now you sound like a very enthusiastic food farmer, but you're more than that. You diversify.
Yeah.
You're actually a biotech company. What else do you integrate into your company and why?
Well, this is the business case side of it. When we first looked at the business opportunity, we were the first company in our category. In fact, I don't even know if there was a category before Naturally Splendid. We listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange on the venture. Last year, we were ranked number 4 in diversified industries. So we went from a category that didn't even exist to being a leader in diversified industries. That opportunity gave us the means to raise capital. It gave us the opportunity to create high-end personnel to be involved in our public company. But we also noticed very early that we didn't want to be another commodity. I didn't want to put just hemp seed and oil and proteins in containers and use them, it'd be a commodity, and just market that. We knew there had to be a differentiator, and we believe that to be science and technology. So there's many companies out there that provide great hemp seed and protein and oil, and I'm very supportive of them, and I think they're providing great products. But generally, that's where they stop. And if they have product innovation, it's usually about, bars or different flavoring. I mean, we do that as well. But where we excel is we invested in science and technology and research and development. And there was a group out of the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and they were doing amazing science involving the entire cannabis plant, extraction and formulation, not only of the ingredients in hemp, but actually medical marijuana as well. And this is where the cannabinoid opportunity began to arise. What I also discovered at that time was you didn't need to grow marijuana to have the health benefits of this amazing plant. And in fact, you can extract most of those healthy ingredients or opportunities from hemp. You can have all of the health without any of the high, and that was what we formed our company on. So we invested in science and technology, cost millions of dollars US, about 10 to 12 million dollars US, to develop the technology that we embedded into Naturally Splendid. And that was the first part. So understanding the market and then advancing our opportunity through science and technology. But then the last key piece was, where do you process this? So we invested in a facility. We bought 51% of a facility called the Protein Oil Starch Bioprocessing Center, located on the University of Saskatoon in Saskatchewan, a province in central Canada. And the facility was built in the late 1990s for about 20 million Canadian dollars. It would cost $30 million to replace this facility now, but this is where we can do our extraction and formulation. It's one thing to have the science and technology, but if you don't have the capacity to deliver products, then you really don't have anything yet. You have a concept, you have an idea. You don't have a financially viable business model. And that's where Naturally Splendid, I believe, excels.
How do you, as an analyst, Simon, see his business model with the diversification and the biotech aspect?
Well, I think the diversification is obviously very interesting to investors because it means that the company has several legs to stand on. And really, you could see a sort of cascade of opportunities for Naturally Splendid over the next few years. And the breakthrough has come really in the first half of this year through selling hemp seed shells to South Korea. But over the next few months, I expect Naturally Splendid will expand into South Korea with Hemp Omega. And then, of course, as Craig was saying, the other markets in surrounding South Korea are also very interesting. I believe that Naturally Splendid's marketing partner in South Korea actually originates in Japan. So that would obviously provide Naturally Splendid with an entree into the Japanese market. And then, of course, there's the Canadian market where Naturally Splendid is already very well established through brands like Natera and Positive Effects, which is the pet food line. And obviously, we all know that consumers in North America are absolutely fanatical about their pets. It's a multi-billion-dollar market and it's growing very fast. And hemp extract can be used in several products. For example, for dogs, you can apply this hemp extract as a topical to their paws and also their snouts. So, I mean, there are just multiple opportunities out there.
How do you see the market around Naturally Splendid? The other companies, how do they develop? How do they grow or merge? What have you observed?
Well, the growth opportunity, of course, hasn't gone completely unnoticed. There's been quite a lot of M&A activity, merger and acquisition activity in this market over the last few years. For example, we saw Compass, which is a major United States-based fund, coming in for Manitoba Harvest. We've seen the takeover of another Canadian hemp company, Vega. also by an American company for $500 million. And I expect to see more deals along these lines in the future.
Mm-hmm. David, your audience of, 100 million people interacting with your Facebook page is interested in hemp and what's good for their health. Are they also interested in hemp, the business?
I suspect some people are. Actually, when you mentioned Manitoba Harvest, Mike Fata and his crew there are very close friends of mine. We've done dozens, maybe more, health food shows together. And I know him and his wife and their family and all of that crew for many, many years. And they worked very, very hard. But what was amazing is they really broke through and actually got their company up to a value. I think they sold out up for over $120 million, which was just incredible to see it from a room in an apartment all the way to a mega processing facility. Now, they're not doing what Naturally Splendid does. They're not at that level, but they did have the mega processing for the hemp seed. They did have the very interesting array of machines to produce hemp proteins of various different qualities, including a 70% hemp protein product, which I was very enamored with and actually used in one of my products for a while because it had this really interesting solubility. So to me, this entire market is being watched very closely. There are people in my world that are looking at entering into this area of business, and it's something that I think we're just getting our foot into the door into the worldwide level of where this can go. So for example, what was 20 tons of product suddenly becomes 120 tons of product 2 years later in Korea. This is going to happen in Japan. This is going to happen in India. This is going to happen in Russia. The Russian market's very interesting for hemp as well because the Russians are very health conscious and it's in the culture. And so we can see an expansion of the hemp market in Russia like we've never imagined. I think it can happen here in Germany as well. It's still a very low amount of acreage being farmed for hemp here and very, very small industry still. Tremendous opportunities.
We see people looking for what makes sense and what is good for them in what they eat and how they do sports and what they consume, but also in what they invest. Do you have a sense of those investors who approach their investment with that sense of value?
Yes, of course. I mean, very much so. The trend towards ethical investing is also a big trend, and a company like Naturally Splendid can very much be a part of that. And I can imagine that Naturally Splendid will be targeted by ethical investment funds.
Do you think ethical investment is like the flavor of the month or the trend of the year or like a fashion that will come and go? Or do you think that's a long-term trend?
Well, ethical investment has been around really since the beginning of my career, more than 20 years ago. And it's just grown and grown and grown, and I think will continue growing.
Mm-hmm. We also mentioned all the parts of the plant we're not even using yet. Yes. All the fibers or that are being used for material in cars and airplanes, for composite materials, could be used for houses, could be used for paving roads, but not yet that much really, so some of it is just being tucked away. Do you think there's a potential growth in the world market for this new commodity, the fiber of the hemp plant that could replace everything that's derived from petrol?
Yes, I don't see why not. I mean, Craig has already been talking about the potential of hemp in the paper market, also as a building material. I mean, this is, the fact that you can incorporate hemp into bricks, and for the entire life of the building that those bricks are made of, you can be absorbing or you can be sequestering CO2 is obviously incredibly interesting.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of investors who are not just interested in ethical investment, also in long-term things. You know, people want to place their money where they know this is going to grow on long term, beyond the hysterical movements of the day or the season.
Well,
Do you believe that?
I really don't think we need to have any worries on that score. I mean, obviously, the trend towards healthy eating and the fact that we have an aging population who are becoming increasingly, or also naturally health conscious. I mean, these are just this is a mega trend. I mean, that the investment community as a whole is very well aware of.
And I think that's very important, Simon. We're called Naturally Splendid, not Naturally Splendid Hemp Company. And I know we've focused on hemp and the amazing opportunities that it has, and they are. It's a great business model, and it's certainly sufficient enough to carry Naturally Splendid very far. But I think what you need to do, if you're going to increase opportunity and diversify your product offering, you mitigate risk. So there's going to be other hemp companies that want to compete with us, and we will embrace the competition, because there really isn't competition yet. There's so much demand for this product that we're not fighting for market share. But you still need to mitigate risk. You need to get outside of that one product, one trick pony. And this is where Naturally Splendid does excel. Like I said, the other companies we talked about that were absorbed, they were hemp companies, okay? Hemp Oil Canada is a hemp company. It's a great company. They do great work, but they have one product. Naturally Splendid has an array of ingredients. And just like David is a big supporter of hemp, it's not just hemp. You need more in your life than that. So Naturally Splendid, the technology that we've discussed where I can extract hemp oil and turn it into a water dispersible powder and emulsion is just part of it. We can do that with canola if we want. We can do that with flax. And you might ask why. It's because it has a different omega ratio. So if you want to prescribe or consume different omega extracted products for different reasons, Naturally Splendid is the company that you come to. And the one that we're most excited about, and I know that David, we talked briefly about this, is algae. And to be able to extract oils from algae and make those commercially viable opens up an entirely new market to Naturally Splendid. So omega extraction and formulation really is what Naturally Splendid is talking about, but where we really made our big inroads, as Simon knows, I think we went from several $100,000 in 2015. In the first quarter of 2016, we did $1.4 million. And then we did $3.6 million the next quarter. So Naturally Splendid is very much on an uptick of income right now. But it's built around hemp. Don't think for a second Naturally Splendid isn't looking at other markets and other opportunities in the nutritional field. And that's what I believe really brings investors on board. Naturally Splendid, we're leaders and innovators in hemp. And we've watched other people jump on board behind us. We were the first company to go public in our space. And now we're going to expand that product offering. We're going to continue to have a competitive advantage. And in my belief, you have to do it outside of just one product. So our science and technologies have been built around extraction and formulation, yes, of hemp oil, but of many different omegas from many different sources through our facility in Saskatoon. So we have our own processing, extraction, formulation facility. And that's what we're able to do, bring our science and technology and bring additional ingredients, products, and services onto the public market. And that's where I believe our real strength is.
David, is your audience interested in algae and what you can do with it?
Absolutely. The algae oil market is a growing market because we're seeing much more concern about the quality of fish and fish oil from the open seas. And there's a great concern of mercury contamination in fish, amongst other things. Phthalates and plastics contamination in fish is a big issue. Antibiotics. And that has made it into mainstream consciousness. It's common for me to take, for example, an article on the problems with open water fish and put that up at the top of my site and for it to get 10 million hits. That's common. So that means people are aware of it. Now the alternatives are, okay, can we really trust that cod liver oil will survive the next 40 years? And the answer is it's probably not going to make it. So what's going to happen? We're going to have to go to other forms of omega-3. So what's in hemp is called ALA, alpha-linolenic acid. It also contains linoleic acid, which is the omega-6 that's in hemp. The other omega-3s that are from marine sources are DHA and EPA. We now have very reliable algae sources of DHA and EPA. In fact, that's where it begins in the food chain in the ocean. So in the beginning of the food chain, you're going to have a Nanochloropsis gadatana, which is a particular species of open water marine phytoplankton that produces DHA. That will then be eaten by krill. Krill will then be eaten by salmon. Salmon will then swim up the river and be eaten by a bear. or us. And so it has to start somewhere. What we're seeing is more interest in going to the source. Nanochloropsis, for example, is an interesting genus of algae that produces omega-3 fatty acids. The thing is that what's wonderful is they can be produced and put into an emulsion in the same way that we see ALA. And they have a nice array of other similar phospholipids that come with them. So they're more digestible actually than fish oil. One of the big problems of cod liver oil is that it's top heavy. It sits up high, you burp it up for hours. Not everybody, but a lot of people do, and they get turned off to it big time. And when you do algae oil, you can get the same amount of, let's say, 1,200 milligrams of DHA and EPA, but you digest it and it feels good going all the way through. If you're to take that product and do what these guys do, which is create an emulsion with ALA, he could actually become, Naturally Splendid could actually become the first source ever of having all three of the major and required omega-3s, ALA, DHA, EPA, in a powdered emulsion. And that's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you, David. And that's exactly where we're trying to build our company, to provide the greatest array of nutrition by research and development, and of course our own processing. And this is, I believe, is what the investors are seeing. We've seen a resurgence, a big support in this sector, Simon, especially in the Canadian markets recently. There's been a lot of activity in the area. Naturally Splendid recently completed a financing. It was oversubscribed several times over. That's just an indication of the type of investor interest in this sector right now. And Naturally Splendid is one of the leaders in that sector.
Simon.
Yes, I can only echo that. In fact, Craig has told me that the issue would have been even larger in volume if the share price hadn't performed so well in recent weeks. And I think we've gone from 30 cents since the beginning of September to the mid-40s now. And if the Canadian authorities hadn't intervened to prevent possible dilution of existing shareholders, Naturally Splendid would have been able to do even more than $4 million.
Simon, David, Craig, thank you very much for joining in this ComCap Media Roundtable about hemp, the multi-billion-dollar crop. Thank you very much to you for watching. I hope we inspire you to taste it for your food, try it for your health, and check it out for your portfolio. Please mail us your comments and questions to roundtable@comcapmedia.